So your personal betting, would you still price a race up yourself? So would your pricing be
Absolutely.
the be all in well the main thing? You're looking for value.
Yeah, yeah. Looking to back the overs. I mean, not it's not a simple case of you blindly bet the overs in any race or every race, but you need to have an opinion, and a price is really just a number that expresses that. So I would never take under the odds or under my price, um, but it just doesn't mean that a horse is marked at 5 to 1 and it's 10 to 1 doesn't automatically warrant a bet. There are other exterminating, well, there are other factors that you really need to consider. It just depends on the race and the setup. I mean, I might have marked that horse 5 to 1, but it was a bit of a guess because of unknown factors regarding fitness or other matters.
Okay, so you would respect the market if it was going totally against what you came up with, rather than be bullish and think they've got it totally wrong. I'm going to have a press up.
Look, if a horse is say resuming from a spell, then I'll certainly tune into the market intelligence late and factor that in to what I've done and make adjustments as required. If I've got a race where all the form's exposed, the horses are into their preparation, I'm confident that I've got it right, and the market has a different opinion to me, then I'll back myself with more confidence.
Okay, it's interesting you say that a price wouldn't be an automatic bet. So because a lot of people I've spoken to would say that if they make something 5 to 1 and it's 7 to 1, then they would back it regardless. That wouldn't be something you would do.
Not necessarily. Look, there are plenty of examples where I would, but other times no. So horses, as I said, horses that are resuming or have interrupted preparations or may have been scratched a few times since their last run, and which might indicate a setback, for example. Those types of runners are runners I'm a little bit more cautious about, and I'm looking for market guidance on those for sure. If I'm opposing a horse just simply because I don't think the performance figures are there, and the horse has had plenty of starts, and I can't really see any weaknesses in my process, then it doesn't really matter that I market 10 to 1 and the market's 3 or 4 to 1. I know ultimately the market over large data is accurate and is an efficient medium of representation of the horse's chance. But there's obviously individual circumstances where they get it wrong, and that's what we're looking to capitalise as punters.
Okay. Now bankroll management. Be interested to know, how do you stake and how do you bankroll your personal bets?
I bet to collect, and look, I'm not alone in this. I think most people do something similar. I bet to collect the percentage of my bankroll based off my rated price. So the same as what Peter would do. Uh, Probably the difference is I sort of rate the races with a confidence level attached to them. So, and really what I'm talking about is the confidence level in my market. And if it's a normal, a fairly typical level of confidence, then I wouldn't change my bet sizing. If I was less confident, I'd reduce that bet size. But ultimately, if I mark a horse 2 to 1 and I'm backing it to win, you know, $10,000 and I'm having $5,000 on the horse, well, if it's 4 to 1 or 5 to 1, I'm not going to change the bet if I'm confident with my assessment.
Is all your betting done with a traditional bookmaker, or do you use the betting exchanges, or do you go racing still?
Look, I used to go to the track regularly, and I went back pre-COVID for a few years, and I used to fly to Sydney twice a week from Brisbane, which I was living in then, to go to the races, and that was an expensive exercise, obviously with airfares and accommodation and meals and transport and so forth. But the advantage was there in doing that. Since COVID occurred, the track's dead for all the reports I hear. I still ring through a few bets to bookmakers on track, but most of it's betting with multiple corporates because they all have to bet you the minimum bet anyway. So a little bit on the exchange, but even that's getting tough too because of the cost in transacting that has changed too over the last few years.
There's something I was interested in. I read that I think would resonate with most punters, even if they are the most fastidious at keeping records and stuff. If 50% of your bankroll is gone, you'd be able to bet the same as you would normally. If the answer is no, then you'll find it tough to survive. So what's your advice if that's us? What do we do?
Well, it happens quite often enough. Anyway, look, I'd say in the last 4 or 5 years, it's happened to me on 3 occasions where I have sort of got close to that or just over that 50% drawdown, and it's certainly not a pleasant experience, and it does do your head in, and it can affect your judgment. I think that I take solace in going back through my records, as I said before, and really sort of drilling down into those periods and seeing how I came out of them and what were the decisions and what were the time frames like that led to a resurrection in profit. And sometimes it's fairly quick. Look, I remember in 2006. I was probably down about 63% of my betting bank come September. So even though I'd had some winning months, the overall drawdown was horrific, and it was pretty scary. But this is obviously one of the catalysts that led me to have the confidence to go pro. I recovered all of that and ended up winning 6 figures by the end of December. So the period of September to December was just magnificent. But the first 8 months of the year were shocking.
I think you bet was it 5% of your total bankroll? That seems to be quite a big figure. A lot of people
bet to collect. A bet to collect.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so if I've marked a horse even money, then I'm betting to collect 5 units or 5% of my bankroll.
Okay, so what would you so if you had, I don't know, whatever I'm sure you don't want to talk about figures, but what percentage of your bankroll would be your biggest bet?
Look, I have a maximum which is about 3%.
Okay, so is your staking dependent on what that bankroll is at the time? So when you got to that point when you were 60% down on it, you still bet into your figures for the total bankroll to begin with?
I did then. I changed what I do now, so I do review it and I do reset the number. I experimented with actually resetting it after every race, and found that it was just too much to think about. Given that often there's only 5 or 10 minutes between races in different states if you're betting in different states, so it was a bit too of an administrative burden to manage, and it really didn't add anything to the bottom line. So look, if I start to get onto a good run, and let's just say I'm winning twice my expectation, then I might make an adjustment to the bank and bet slightly more.
Yeah, you mentioned that everything evolves all the time. It's a continuous learning curve. When do you decide that an edge that you had has gone before following it over a cliff?
I think that a lot of people tend to play the hot hand, and I'm not a subscriber to that idea. I think it's a dangerous way to bet, so for me, I do regular market research and I examine the factors that I rate as important. And what I do look for is changes in the way the market reacts to those. So, but that's probably done more on a biannual basis than a weekly or a monthly or anything else. So twice a year, I'd sit down and do a detailed review of the market and have a look at what it's doing and what it's getting right, what it's getting wrong.
I suppose that covers my next step. The ability to maintain composure and faith in your process is paramount. I mean, have you
absolutely.
ever had any self-doubt at all?
Yes, I think everyone has. When you're going through a bad run, it's natural to think that you're doing something wrong, or that maybe you should look to change something. Not a bad day or a bad week. I mean, we have those all the time. I mean, we still have losing months. That happens. Thankfully, not too often, but it does. It's still probably 2 or 3 times a year you might lose, whether it be a very small amount or a larger amount. But yeah, it does have, it affects you, and it affects your mood, and there's nothing worse than having a terrible Saturday and then having to go out to dinner on a Saturday night and try and be entertaining to your guests.
Peter mentioned the British corporates that came in and sort of messed things up, but they also have to abide by the minimum bet rule, which they don't have to do over here, where they can limit you to nothing. Is that something that works in your favour? Because the argument over here is that they would bet to 150% and nobody will get any value and nobody can win. Is that what's happened in Australia?
Look, the betting percentages have certainly risen over time, and that's not a good thing as a punter in a technical sense. And it's certainly harder to find value. That's definite. It's not the minimum bet laws, I think, that have been the catalyst for that. It's been the taxation regime that's happened in Australia. So we have what we call a point of consumption tax, or the bookmakers do, and they essentially have to pay tax based on where the actual punter's domiciled, and that they've continued to increase the rate of those taxes, as well as the costs on corporate bookmakers for things like race fields legislation. And so that has actually affected, I think, the market percentages more than what the minimum bet laws required them to bet. I mean, it's only to win $2,000, Simon, and look, it's insane compared to what it used to be.
So how many bookmakers would you need to bet up to that limit to get the sort of bets on that you would want?
I've got 38 accounts, and of those, I would say that about half of them are active on a more regular basis. Some of them are just sporadic in terms of when I use them. So yeah, you need, it's logistically tougher because you need to have help doing that. You can't just attack 16 bookmakers, for example, at once. You need to actually have people helping you put that money on. And you're not allowed to use automation in Australia as a punter. If the bookmaker believes that you are using automation, or they can compile some form of evidence to suggest that that's what you're doing, then they don't have to bet you. So it's not fair, but it's the reality. So essentially, I have 3 guys that help me on a Saturday, and also I use a commission agent.
Okay, so people like to learn from guys like you. So what's the single most important bit of good practice as a punter that separates a winning punter from a losing one, if you're advising somebody?
I would say recording your bets and recording all the details associated with that bet. Price, bookmaker, what your price was versus, say, top fluctuation versus tote, and using that as a tool to analyze and improve your processes and your decision making. That's probably equally as important as bankroll management, making sure that you don't overbet.
And I looked on your website. You've got several endorsements there from professional punters that are successful using your system, Ratings2Win. You answered the question earlier. Everybody does it. They use it as a tool, as part of their armory. So it's never going to endanger the profitability for everyone else using it if all these professionals are winning using your system.
Look, we limit the number of clients that can actually get access to it anyway. But you're right. I mean, there could be some impact if we're all playing the same market or playing the same niche. But I think there's enough diversification in the client base that are betting semi-professionally and professionally, to warrant or to really sort of nullify the effect of anything negative. You know, I could be doing form on, say, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Someone else might be doing Western Australia. Someone else might specialise in Tasmania. I'm just picking out some random scenarios here, but that's the extent of it. And we all do it a bit differently. And you know, Peter's, for example, is a client of mine, and he uses our database, and he and I will come up with totally different answers on a race. So I think it's really more about the tools and what it can deliver for you in terms of time savings and accuracy than it is about, you know, replicating opinions across the market.
Okay, and the final question, Paul. Does your own personal version of Ratings to Win contain an edge that you keep up your sleeve for your own personal use?
Absolutely. It does, but it's not something that can't be achieved by any client using it. So it's more about the single adjustment number that we come up with, which gets applied to the rating, and things like the way in which we rate jockeys and trainers, and score those, as well as the map adjustments and bonuses and penalties that are applied. So that would be, I would say, the only difference. But as I said, you know, anyone can achieve that if they're prepared to put in the work and do it for themselves.
Okay, there's definitely a future for professional backing in Australia for the foreseeable.
Look, for the foreseeable future, yes, it's getting tougher. That is beyond any doubt. I mean, governments and principal racing authorities need to temper their greed for the tax dollar, I think. I mean, any tax on the bookmaker is essentially a tax on the punter, who is racing's only customer, and it's disappointing that they don't have the foresight to see that. But I think that the hangover from COVID, certainly in terms of the betting landscape, is starting to bite on some of the operators. So we'll probably see some form of consolidation over the next few years, but I don't know where that's going to go to in terms of alleviating some of the pressure on margins.
Okay, well, brilliant, Paul Daly. It's been great talking to you. Before we go, what's that in the background?
Randwick Racecourse. It's I'm not there. It's just something I put up because I've got all these boxes in my office because we're currently building. So we're sort of it's not set up the way it would normally be. But yeah, it's the mounting yard there at Randwick.
Excellent. Okay, nice and sunny for us people back home here in winter. Okay, Paul Daly, it's been a great talking to you. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.